Hi, so in this video we're going to talk about the bind function in Tkinter. So basically it allows you to bind these Tkinter elements to any key or a mouse button and make it do whatever you want with it. So it's a really powerful function, and I won't really need to use all these extra functionalities that bind provides us, but I'm just going to introduce it to you so you know it exists. But we will just be using a simple functionality here, so yeah, okay, let's get into it. So what I'm going to do first is create a function. So let me just first introduce you to the binding of the keys. So I'm going to call this function key, and the function takes in an event variable. So we're going to do that, and what we're going to do in here is basically print out what key has been pressed. I'm going to say print f string pressed. And here I'm going to say event dot car. And the next thing we need to do is bind it to an element. So I'm going to bind it to our entry here. So I'm going to say e.bind, and we can bind it to a specific key, but in this case we want to see whichever key's been pressed. So I want to bind it to any key that's been pressed. So for that I'm going to do this. And then you need to specify the function you're binding it to, which is going to be key. So let's run this and see what it does. So if I enter stuff here, you can see in my console down here it prints all those characters that I press into the entry. Okay, so if you want to bind it to a specific key, you can just say that you're binding it to a specific key. So if I bind it to A and I run this again, so if I type any other key, it's not going to do anything, but if I type in A, it's going to say pressed A down here. Okay, so let's talk about let's bind something to the mouse clicks. So I'm going to create another function here. Def, I'm going to call it, let's call it mouse. And this also takes an event. Print f clicked. And remember, mouse, when you click somewhere on the screen, the position of that screen is going to be two values, because it's going to be an x value and a y value. So we want both of those values to know where exactly we have clicked. So I'm going to first say event.x, and I'll say comma event.y, and I'm actually going to bind it to the text element here instead of the E, which is just a single line, so we get more space to click. Text dot bind, and in here I'm going to say button 1, which is the left mouse button, and I'm going to bind it to the function that we just created, which is going to be mouse. And yeah, let's try this out. So I'm going to stop this from running and run it again. So if I click anywhere in the text area, you can see down here it gives me the position of where exactly I clicked, which could be really handy if you're creating some sort of GUI where you need the mouse to click on different buttons and those buttons do different things. So this is a really powerful function, so that's why I wanted to introduce it, even though we don't really need it that much. We don't need all these extra functionalities. We do need the function, but we don't need these extra functionalities. So yeah, that's a handy little function. So the next thing we're going to do is actually bind our entry to a function that sends whatever we type into the entry and press enter. So that should then send whatever we typed in to our client, and the client can then do something with it. So what I'm going to do now is get rid of the key function, and I'm going to create a send function, which is going to take arguments. So we don't really need the event argument in this function, but when you bind a function to a widget, the function is expected to have some sort of argument. So I'm instead going to be doing this, and in the function I'm basically going to say, well, first we need to create a variable here in the initialization function, which I'm going to call self.send cmd, which is going to be an empty string, and in the send function we're going to assign that variable whatever we type inside the entry widget. So we get whatever you type inside the entry widget, you can get it through the get function. And then I'm going to print that out to the text field, because this send function is going to be bound to the enter key, so the return key. So we're going to print whatever we type in the entry widget to the text field. So I'm going to say text.insert end, and here I'm going to say self.sendCMD. And down here I'm going to, instead of binding it to A, I'm instead going to bind it to the return key. That's going to be sent. So that looks alright to me, so I suppose we can test it out. So I'm going to type something in, and I'll press enter, and it prints it out here. Okay, so that works. So in the next section I am going to send this value to the client, so our original client. But before that I'm going to be doing some changes to the client because of certain things I'm going to talk about in the next video. So thanks for watching.